Hello and welcome to our special broadcast here from Jaipur in Rajasthan. I'm Parikshit. Luthra, US Vice President J.D. Vance, his wife Usha Vance and three children visited Jaipur today. They visited the Amer Fort, the Hawa Mahal. You can see pictures of them going all across these forts, having a good time with their family. The big message from J.D. Vance here in Jaipur was that India needs to buy more US defense equipment, allow American companies greater access to India, support Donald Trump's clarion call for drill, baby, drill. Also laying out the wish list that US has for India. He urged India to buy more defense equipment, as we said earlier, especially F-35 fighter jets. He called for strengthening the energy partnership and said that US can be a long-term, reliable supplier of cheap energy to India, and the kind of energy that India needs for its development needs, for its manufacturing needs, and for having data centers and AI technology as well. Last night, Prime Minister Modi hosted J.D. Vance and his family at 7 Lok Kalyan Marg for dinner. Following that, the US Trade Representative issued a statement that he welcomed the finalization of terms of reference for the bilateral trade negotiations. Now, this is an important aspect of the negotiation as it lays out the contours, the boundaries, and also the ambition of every chapter of the trade negotiation. The US also said that they appreciate the constructive approach that India has followed when it comes to this trade negotiation. They have acknowledged the kind of tariff reductions that that India has done for the United States, but there is more that the US wants. The USTR even said that they are looking for more robust, long-term commitments that are beneficial to the US economy and US businesses. So what does this visit of J.D. Vance really imply for India-US ties? Joining us right now to break all of this down is Meera Shankar, former Indian ambassador to the United States. Air Vice Marshal Manmohan Bahadur. Also on the show with us is Raymond Vikri, Senior Associate and Chair on India and Emerging Economies at CSIS. Prabhash Ranjan, Professor and Vice Dean, Research at Jindal Global Law School. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. Air Marshal Bahadur, if I could begin with the F-35 question. First time we heard this was in the White House when Donald Trump said that we want India to buy more defense equipment and maybe even F-35s eventually. Today you had J.D. Vance again signaling, saying that we want you to be a big buyer of defense equipment from the US and we want to offer F-35s, stealth fighters. Give us a sense whether this really fits into the Air Force scheme of things. Is this the kind of platform that we really want? And despite the pressure, will India go ahead for it?
Thank you for getting me in. And F-35 is a carrot that has been dangled for quite some time now in front of India. We've got to manage our interests just the way the Americans are doing for their trade and for their strategic interests. So we need to remember that our Air Force is still 36% Russian, and so are the other two services. So when we are getting an equipment, and incidentally, we've never bought a fighter aircraft from the United States, ever. Transport, helicopters, yes. So to get that into our scheme of things, vis-a-vis our radars, which are Russians, basically, the latest being the S-400. If you remember, Turkey was moved out of the F-35 program because they went in for S-400s, or they were wanting to go in for S-400s. So we have to keep the broader picture in mind and then take a call. Having said that, if I may just add, there is a lot of trumpet blowing that happens everywhere with every country. We had in 2012 the Defense Technology Trade Initiative, DTTI, and a lot of brouhaha was there on this. What happened to that? I mean, you cannot change our interests, or the American interests can't change just because a new person comes in the White House every 4 years. And this time when it has happened, it has upset the whole apple cart. I mean, if Ukraine can be thrown out like a fly in a teacup, we need to be careful. Because tomorrow another person comes as the President of the United States. Where is the history of continuity vis-a-vis military ties with India and the United States? The United States was the first country that imposed sanctions in Pokhran II when it happened. So I'm sure our negotiators will demand their pound of flesh, just as the Americans will. We need to take a broad view, keeping our strategic interests in mind.
Right, so you're saying we need to take a broad view and also look at continuity of supply. You said that 36% of our defense equipment is Russian. We need to keep our strategic needs in mind. We've never bought a fighter aircraft from the United States, and if we do, we need to make sure we get a pound of flesh in terms of long-term contracts and long-term maintenance contracts. Is this what you're saying, Air Marshal Bahadur?
That is absolutely correct. And what is it that they are going to offer? Are they going to offer the latest avionics with the F-35 when they come in? I doubt it, because they know that we will have to synchronize everything electronic and avionic with our ground defense, air defense systems. And that's where the Russian equipment comes in. So will we get what we want? That is to be studied.
Right. Let me get in Ambassador Meera Shankar at this point. Ambassador Shankar, how did you see J.D. Vance's speech here at the Rajasthan International Centre? I was here in the hall. The speech was very, very strong. He began his speech by speaking about Prime Minister Modi, thanking him about how his children loved India and how the only people, the two leaders that their children really like are Prime Minister Modi and Donald Trump. So he made all the right noises, but he made some very strong demands. In fact, rather than how the trade could be mutually beneficial, it was more like buy more defense equipment, buy more fighters, buy more energy. So what was your sense from J.D. Vance's speech and the message he delivered?
Well, he delivered Trump's message. He's amplifying it. And the message has been that this is something which the US wants, and it's not looking really, talks about reciprocal trade, but it's not looking at reciprocity in terms of trade. It's looking at pushing unilateral advantage. And that is something that India will have to consider very carefully, because in the process of trying to manage the Trump administration's shift in trade policy, I think India cannot open up sectors which are problematic, like agriculture across the board, nor should it take defense equipment if it feels it does not need it, or if the terms and conditions don't meet our requirements of localization of production, of continuity of supply, and if it's too expensive, because your whole strategy at the moment is to try to indigenize your defense production. You are looking at the Tejas Mark I aircraft, which are still being rolled out. You are looking at the Tejas Mark II aircraft, for which we are buying the GE engine, upgrade. And that agreement, I don't think, has been finalized as yet. That is India's priority. And we are also keen to buy maritime patrol aircraft. We are keen, perhaps, also looking at Striker carriers, vehicles. So there are areas where we certainly want to work with the US and get technology, but it's not something which the US can and should dictate to us. It is something we have to decide on the basis of our requirements. And there are areas where there is synergy between the US and India in the field of energy, in the field of defense technology, in the field of high technology. And we should see where we can work in all these areas. At the moment, from what I understand, we are looking at opening up sectors of the Indian economy in return for the US not putting punitive tariffs. So no additional benefit to India from the framework that the US is pushing. I think we need to be very clear that it has to work for both countries. It's a synergy in relationships means that there has to be a win-win situation for both countries. And if it is at the cost of one country, it can't be sustained. The relationship will go sour.
Very important point, ma'am. You're saying that when you speak about a synergy in partnership, it has to be a win-win for both, not at the cost of one country. Currently, we're not getting any additional benefits from the framework that US is pushing. It seems that India is wanting to give concessions to avoid reciprocal tariffs. Let me get in Prabhash Ranjan at this point. Prabhash Ranjan, one of the points that the Coalition of Service Industries, which represents the likes of Google, also Amazon in the US, is the fact that India must support a continued moratorium on e-commerce duties. We must reduce tariffs to zero for ICT products under the WTO framework. How do you think India will fare if we give in to concessions on the terms of the United States? What will happen to our obligations with other countries? What are some of the challenges that we could possibly land ourselves in?
Thank you, Parikshit, for having me. I think that's a very important question, and I completely agree with Ambassador Shankar that any deal that we strike with the US has to be beneficial for India. Now, what is important for us to understand is that the Trump administration has launched an offensive against the global rule-based multilateral system. And India, which has always championed a rule-based multilateral system, has to express its concern about this. So, if you look at countries like China, or if you look at many other developing countries, they have taken, or they have at least publicly announced much more, stronger terms in terms of what the US is doing to the international trading system. India's response has largely been that it has been silent on this. And I think that's where the problem lies, that we should not look at this only from the point of view of striking a deal with the US, but we should also look at it from the point of view of the larger multilateral trading system and where we stand in it. So let's take the example of the bilateral trade agreement that is being negotiated currently. Now, if this bilateral trade agreement will not be applicable on an MFN basis, which means that whatever tariffs India reduces for products coming from America without extending them to European Union or UK or other countries, then other countries will have a problem with this. Now, maybe US will be able to deal with it, but how will we deal with it? Now, if it is to be done on MFN basis, which means that you reduce tariff rates for everyone, then perhaps you don't need to have a separate negotiation for a bilateral trade agreement. So how do you get around this is going to be a major legal and economic challenge for India. And since India and the US both are members of the WTO, and US has still not pulled out, not yet, from the WTO, it is important for India to keep reminding the US, not just privately, which I'm sure they must be doing, but also publicly, as Brazil has done, as several other countries have done, that you need to respect international law contained in the WTO, and we have to work with each other within the WTO framework, because that's a framework that exists, that has existed for 3 decades. If we take GATT, it goes back to 1948. The principles are well established, and you can't suddenly throw those principles out and say that we are going to negotiate based on a completely different set of rules. That's going to be complete chaos, certainly for developing countries like India. So I think India has to be careful, has to keep reminding US, both publicly and privately, to respect WTO law and to work within the framework of the WTO.
Right, that's an important point, that if you make a sweetheart deal for the United States, others will have a problem and they could take you to WTO as well. Let me also bring in Raymond Vickery. Raymond Vickery, a very authoritative voice when it comes to American politics, American trade policies as well. Raymond, what I would like to understand from you, it seems that Donald Trump is not really interested in any sort of trade deal. If there is a president who can pull out of trade agreements, who can change his mind on a country like China overnight, then how do you take the US administration at face value when they're saying that we want a mutually beneficial trade agreement? All it seems to be boiling down to is that the US wants us to buy more energy, buy more defense, and have very long-term contracts with the US, and somehow US wants to be our biggest supplier of energy in future. So keeping these different messages in mind, how does India navigate the new White House?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I think you're absolutely right. India and the United States have worked together to build peace and prosperity in the world, and each president, whether it be Republican or Democrat, has advanced that. But these are not normal times in the United States, and I wouldn't want your viewers to think so. There are attacks on the rule of law, on the media, on higher education that Vice President Vance has led the charge on. And he is a chief isolationist. In spite of what is being said today in India. It is very important, it seems to me, to heed what the law professor has just said. The approach of the Trump administration is that of a real estate developer. It's transactional. It's what can you do for me today? Don't worry about the longer run, but what do I get out of this? And the basic problem is in regard to tariffs that the Trump administration has a view that we can completely wall off the rest of the world in essence, except on our terms, that we'll bring all manufacturing back to the United States. We won't have extended international supply chains. And what is going on now in the U.S.-India relationships, we would hope would lessen barriers to trade. But that runs completely contrary to the Trump approach that manufacturing ought to all be reshored to the United States. So it remains to be seen how this will turn out. In regard to energy particularly, I think it's important to recognize that the United States and India have a great interest in being able to have responsible energy rather than just drill, baby, drill. I helped get the civil nuclear deal through Congress. One hopes that there would be progress in that clean energy source. And across the board, it's going to be necessary to take into account the environmental impacts of these. India has been a leader. The United States is stepping out of it. So in sum, I would say that yes, the U.S.-India relationship is strong, but simply abandoning the multilateral system in favor of a transactional approach is not in the interest of the United States or India. The rule of law, a rules-based approach, should apply across the board, not just in regard to tariffs and the economic relationship, but respect for human rights, respect for democracy, respect for rule of law, for science. And unfortunately, this administration in the United States is headed in exactly the opposite direction.
Right. We may have a early trade deal with the U.S. as well. Raymond, it could come in the next 3 months or so. But do you also feel that there is no guarantee that even if we have a trade deal, Trump would respect it? Tomorrow he may just go ahead and may want something more in 2026?
Well, that's been his history, that he makes deals and then walks away from them. Went bankrupt 9 times in the private sector, and yet portrays himself as the greatest deal maker of all times. So India has to follow its self-interest, and the way in which to do that, it seems to me, harking back, is to try to put this in the framework of something which is broader than just who's there today and what the deal is today, but to institutionalize it. So we have some rules-based approach. Or, as you say, tomorrow it can be turned around if President Trump does not like the way India is proceeding on matters which are very extraneous in some sense to trade, on China, on what he wants to have done in real estate development. He has Trump Towers, which are at construction stage in India. He has allies in Elon Musk who have interest in Starlink and Tesla. Suppose he doesn't get what he wants, or his associates don't get what they want, then what happens? So it's very important to look at this relationship.
Very important points.
Eyes.
And institutionalize it, put safeguards and guardrails in place so that India does not get harmed. Meera, Shankar, if I could come to you. Over the last few months, we've made a lot of overtures to the Trump administration. In the union budget, we reduced tariffs on high-end cars to 70%. High-end motorcycle tariffs were also reduced. We've done away with the equalization levy, or Google tax as it was called. Just yesterday, the Competition Commission of India accepted the settlement proposal of Google in an antitrust case for 20 crore rupees. There are also reports that we are willing to put the digital competition law, which has drawn from the EU digital markets law, which the US has been very concerned about. It seems that we put that law on the back burner. Do you think we're giving too many concessions too soon without putting it in pen and paper in the BTA?
Yes, I think with the US, you have to dot the I's and cross the T's as part of a official formal agreement. Any concessions given in advance are pocketed and the goalpost is moved. So I do think that you need to be a bit more conscious of how you are dealing with the United States, so that whatever emerges by way of agreement is beneficial to both sides. And also, as was mentioned by previous speakers, we have to avoid undermining the multilateral system. And also, we have to keep in mind that Trump's record, including with, say, Canada and Mexico, where first he overturned NAFTA and then renegotiated it, and now wants to overturn the renegotiated agreement, which he himself had renegotiated. So I think these are fragile foundations on which to build.
Right. My final question to Air Marshal Manmohan Bahadur. Air Marshal Bahadur, now when it comes to F-35s, I'm coming to that question once again. What has traditionally been India's issue with acquiring this aircraft? Is it that India's adversaries like Pakistan also have this platform? Is it because the US has never given us the technology wanted? They're giving us obsolete technology, which is at least 15 to 20 years older. Where does the problem lie when it comes to the F-35? And where do you think there would be a problem between the political will to buy more defense equipment from the US, including F-35s, and where the bureaucracy and the Air Force will draw a line?
To answer that, I'll actually quote a professor who wrote in the US Army War College Journal, Parameters. See, it says that a partnership can succeed only if it is grounded in mutual indispensability, since anything less creates a dependency, and a dependency by definition is not partnership. So we need to be clear that the person or the country with whom we are trying to partner, there is an element of mutual indispensability. So when it comes to defense, the American R&D is leagues ahead of what we have got or what we can manage in the next few decades. So to my understanding, it will build a tremendous dependency. You can ask the same question, don't we have a dependency on Russia? Yes, but I think the way our history is, the way our memories are, and the way our experiences are, we need to be careful. So when it comes to the F-35 in particular, as I said, will they give it with all the latest avionics? What would be the cost of acquisition? And more importantly, the maintenance, the spare parts, because that will build a dependency and the screw can be turned on you anytime. And thirdly, The point is that the
All right.
Pakistanis are likely to get the Chinese fifth gen, and that's why the pressure is coming on us. We need to keep our feet firmly on ground, eyes wide open.
All right. Air Marshal Bahadur, thank you very much. Prabhash Ranjan, Ambassador Meera, Shankar, Raymond Vikri, thank you very much for joining us on the program. We've completely run out of time, but that's been a fantastic discussion, an eye-opening discussion on India-US trade ties and JD Vance's visit to India as well.